Teacher Training Department Manager for Pearson. I'm also joined by my colleague Michael Brand, another teacher trainer here. I'd
Hi.
like to welcome you. Hi, Michael. I'd like to welcome you to this last of our webinar series. We've been doing webinars this week. Um, uh, the series has been entitled "Working Together." It's been a series that we put together. Pearson we put together with our partner Anaya. So we've been working together on that as well. These have been free online training sessions in which we've been trying to look at some topics of interest for teachers, especially in primary and secondary. Today we are in our offices in Madrid, and we'd also like to know a little bit where you are following us from. So we see some people have already put in the chat box. We've got Almeria, Cádiz, Barcelona, Ciudad Real, Navarra. Okay, we got somebody from Madrid as well. Castellón, yeah, Segovia, Mallorca. So we got somebody from an island there. Granada, Girona, Soria, Castellón, Murcia. So great. Guadalajara, Alcalá de Henares here, right next to Madrid. Madrid. Okay. Oh, we got somebody from Russia as well. Okay, so we got a few people from outside of Spain as well. But we've got loads of people from Spain, which is great. A few people from outside. It's always nice to share these things and collaborate together, which is what we want to do today. The title of today's talk is Creating a Culture of Collaboration in English Class. I want to remind you that we will be recording this. We will be sending out a recording to you. That you'll be receiving an email next week with a recording. We will also have a link to the presentation itself. We'll be giving you a diploma, and you will also have a link to a survey, so we can find out what you think and what other types of webinars you might like to see in the future. And I'll be reminding you about that at the end. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat box, and we'll be looking at that, either answering those questions as we go along or maybe at the end if we can. So, without any further ado, creating a culture of collaboration in an English class. What will we be looking at today? Well, I think the idea of collaboration is something that we hear a lot as teachers. What is collaboration? We want to use it in our classrooms. So what we're going to do is talk about that. First of all, the what. What is collaboration? The second thing we'll be talking about a little bit is why we would use that. What are the benefits of it? And finally, we'll be looking at some practical activities as well, or we'll be looking at a lot of practical activities throughout the talk today, how you might implement it in your classrooms. So let's move on. The first thing we're going to do, the very first activity today, is we're going to try to jump right into collaborative activities. And so what I'm going to do is divide you up into groups. Part of working and collaborating is working in groups. And I'm going to put you in groups according to your birthdays, yeah, or the month of your birth. So if you're a spring person, March, April, or May, yeah, you're going to be in the spring group. June, July, or August, you're the summer group. September, October, November, you're in the autumn group. Or December, January, and February, you will be in the winter group. That's where I would be. I'm in February, so I would be in the winter group. What we're going to be doing is, this may seem a little strange to be doing groups online, but we're going to be using an online tool in a moment. We're going to be going to a Padlet, and I'll be giving you a link to that Padlet. Okay? A Padlet is a online tool that that you can use for collaboration. It's basically sort of a big blank space where you can post things, pictures, links, comments, whatever you like. So what we're going to do then is take a look at our different groups, and depending on your group, you're going to be posting something different. So if you're in your spring group, you are going to tell us what you think collaborative learning is. So write a definition, anything that comes to mind, what you think collaborative learning is. If you're in the summer group, you're going to put down why your students should learn to work collaboratively. So why? What are the benefits? If you're in the autumn group, you want to find a picture. Maybe you want to Google this, a picture which illustrates the benefits of working collaboratively. Okay? You have to be quick for that one because you have to look for it and then find it and then paste it in. And then if you're in the winter group, you just want to find, or if you're in the winter group, you would want to talk about a classroom activity that you have used, which you think promotes collaborative learning. Okay, so I'm going to put the link, I think I have the correct link here still in the text box. See if I can get it in there. No, I have to go get it for you. Hold on 1 second. Get that link for you. I am copying that. Gonna put it in the box. Okay. So all you have to do is to click on that link I just put in the chat box. That will take you to the Padlet. What you're going to need to do now is click on the Padlet twice, yeah, to be able to contribute to that Padlet with a sticky note, what's called a sticky note. And another thing that's very important, put down the name of your group. So write down first if you're in the winter group, winter, and then do your activity. Okay? So I'm going to go to that here, and we're going to start looking at the Padlet together. Okay? So you should be able to see my screen in a moment, and I should be able to take a look at the Padlet. And people are already contributing to the Padlet here. So, okay, some people have put in some information there. I've got people putting in autumn, summer, autumn, spring, winter. But what you want to do is remember to what I told you about before. If you are in, if you're in one group, you want to write down the definition, okay? The winter group, for example, is going to put down an activity they've used. There's another group that's going to be looking for a picture. Oh, there, and then we have a picture which shows collaborative learning. So let's take a look at that very big picture there, okay, coming in. So yes, I think we see kids working on a project, some type of project together, definitely collaborative learning. Okay, it enhances, we got somebody saying it enhances. The results can be better. We're going to talk about why those results can be better. Good. We got enhancing. The work is never, it favors. I think people are halfway through because the results can be better, and in collaborative work, we can learn from each other, definitely. Okay? Sharing. Sharing knowledge too. Collaborative English is sharing knowledge to do something, to improve. Ah, divergent thinking. Very interesting. Enhances divergent thinking. I have another one here. Any role play. Okay, so activities. Great. All right. You're not alone anymore when you're working together. Okay. See if I have more things over to the side here. Maybe I'm missing a few things. I think I've got most of them. Okay, so here we have some people. Um, okay, great. People are saying, in addition, nowadays professions need to be, I think they're saying need to be collaborative, yeah, as well. Okay, students are motivated. They can help each other. They feel all of them are important to achieve the goal. Favors linguistic competence, civic competence. Oh, great. Different kinds of competences as well. Enhances critical thinking. Great. All of these things are going to be things that we're going to be looking at today. So thank you very much for sharing there. That's helped to make our talk today a bit more collaborative already. And let's move on. So you've already talked about a lot of these ideas. So let's still take a look at them quickly. You have talked about, what is collaborative learning. We've looked at this. So, but let's get a few more ideas up there. What is collaborative learning? Okay. So one thing is that the learner or the student is the primary focus of instruction. So what we're talking about here is student-centered classes rather than teacher-centered classes. We've heard this many, many times, yeah. But it's one thing talking about it. It's another thing doing it. And one way of doing this is through collaborative learning. Collaborative learning will put the focus more on the learner and less on the teacher. Yeah. Um, Another thing, interaction and doing are of primary importance. So when you think about interaction, we're talking about, we have, the traditional class where there's a lot of student to teacher interaction, and normally in that direction. But what we're trying to get more and more is interaction between everyone in the classroom. And here we're talking about student to student interaction more than anything else. So lots of more student to student interaction, student to student communication. And the idea of doing, we'll be coming back to this idea in a bit as well. Doing is, this idea that you might hear, I've heard the Chinese proverb, tell me and I forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. So doing things actually, I mean, we talk about constructivist types of learning, and that's all through doing, basically. Okay, working in groups is an important way of learning, and that's a basic feature of collaborative learning as well. Um, this is a little bit more than just doing things in groups, though. It's doing things in groups in a certain way. So actually giving students certain types of skills as well. Skills of being able to ask one another for information. We'll be talking about that today. Evaluating each other's work. We'll be talking about that today. Monitoring themselves and monitoring each other, and other types of social skills we'll be speaking about today. And also, structured approaches to developing solutions to real world problems should be incorporated into learning. So we're talking about this idea of things that are real. We talked about in the webinars the other day, Antonio Cara's webinar yesterday, well, all webinars, Fernando Trujillo's as well, if you were able to join these webinars, and in also Coral Regi's webinar on emotional intelligence that we started off on Tuesday with. We talked about the idea of service learning, for example, and that has to do very much with doing something real, to trying to solve a real problem for your community, whether that community be in your classroom or beyond the classroom. So when something is real, the learning is more real as well. The learning is more meaningful for your students. So that's also something we'll be talking about. Now, the benefits of collaborative learning, a lot of you have already touched on this, but some of the benefits are that, the first one here I have is it helps our learners to become socially competent. And I think, when you think about social competence, the idea of being tolerant, accepting of other people's viewpoints. We're listening to other people. We're listening to other people's viewpoints. We're thinking how we can incorporate those viewpoints into our own and into the group as a whole. If you look around the world at some of the problems that are going on in the world, you certainly think that sometimes many of our leaders could have a little bit more social, or be a little bit more socially competent. This is obviously a skill that we need for the future, and we need right now, and something we need to be inculcating in our kids. Yeah. Another thing here, students see one another as a resource. We'll be coming back to this a number of times today, both me and Michael, and you'll see it. The idea that they're not just looking at their textbook, they're not just getting things from the teacher, but that information is contained in everyone here, and everyone has something to give to the class. Everyone has something to give to this whatever project you're working or things like that. Yeah. Another thing here, that it's useful for mixed ability classes. As teachers, we know we can't be there for everyone all the time. We can't go running around the classroom and be there for each and every student all the time. They have to learn to be self-sufficient and independent. But part of being self-sufficient and independent is knowing how to ask for help from other people, and trusting other people to give you answers, yeah, as well. Having that kind of trust built up in the classroom. And this brings benefits to both if you have pupils helping one another. It brings benefits to both of those pupils, the pupil who is being supported, obviously, but also the pupil who is supporting the other student. Because in that case, they're teaching, and when you're teaching, you're also learning. That's also something that's extremely important. And just the effective things as well, that on an emotional level, how important that is to feel that you're useful to someone else, yeah, when you're giving to someone else. Okay, so moving on. It also develops 21st century skills. Collaboration is a key 21st century skill. But if you think about it, and you'll see this in a lot of the activities today, also communication, critical thinking, you're going to see that today, and creativity. I think there is that as well. Creativity in terms of involving students and getting them to make choices. I think Mike will talk quite a bit about that later as well. It prepares students for real life, okay? So talking about, once again, this idea of doing real tasks that really affect, their community, this prepares them for real life. Real life is often as well about work. Um, and although I know we're talking about primary students and we're not getting them ready for a job tomorrow, they are working. They are working. They're working. They're workers. They work at home with their parents. They work in class with their classmates. Work is what defines us as human beings most of the time, and it's central to our identities. It's central to our social makeup. So work is thinking about work. I don't think it's a bad idea to talk about that when we're talking about primary. We're not talking about getting them ready for the job market here. We're talking about giving them skills. And what are those skills? If you think about this, for example, this is from Forbes, just to throw it out there, but one of those skills is the most sought after skill by most employers nowadays is this idea of the ability to work in a team. If you think about it, that is what you need to do most days. There are very few jobs out there today where you just kind of go and you sit there on your own. There are times when you work on your own, but the times when things really have to happen is when you're communicating with other people, and this is more and more the case every day. So it's something we have to think about. Now we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of creating a culture of collaboration. When we talk about a culture, what do we mean by a culture? We talked about collaboration, so now this idea of culture. When we talk about culture, it's establishing something which is going to work on its own, which is going to happen on its own. So something that they do as second nature. They do it without being prompted by the teacher. It just kind of comes naturally. This is something obviously that doesn't happen overnight. Your students are going to have to be taught to do this many times. If you saw Coral Reggie's talk on emotional intelligence the other day, many times they'll be learning how to do this because the teacher and adults around them and the school will be modeling those behaviors for them, which is something we're going to talk about very, very shortly here. Modeling those behaviors, showing them what is good collaboration, yeah? And Michael's going to talk about that later as well, about making sure your students understanding what good collaboration is and how to assess that and things, which is quite interesting. So we're talking about what was called pro-social behavior many times, which is voluntary behavior intended, to benefit other people, to benefit another person. So these are the types of things like helping, sharing, donating, cooperating, volunteering. These are things that we want our students to do. And through creating this culture, we're also going to be able to do the types of activities in our class which are going to give them skills, these types of skills that they need to be able to take on these values in their lives as well. So how do we get there? Well, here's a study that was done in 2010. It was published in the journal Psychological Science, in which 18-month-old infants were shown some pictures of everyday objects. Here you see tea kettles, yeah, for example. And you notice there are different backgrounds to these. There's a background in A, for example, where you see two people uh, facing each other. Okay, you see here just one person here. Here you see no people whatsoever, just inanimate objects. And over here you see the people not looking at each other. Now the students that were shown these different objects with the different backgrounds, and it had some real effects on the way that they uh, uh, behaved later on their behavior later on. If they were shown the background where they saw the two dolls facing one another, the kids were 3 times more likely to spontaneously help a person in need, which they put into this experiment as well. So just by seeing things like this, by being exposed to this, students became more aware of working together, how important it was to work together and to help one another. And I think we do this a lot of times. We have this, as primary teachers, you probably have this in your DNA in many ways. You do this all the time. And you're probably thinking, well, how? One thing is you model this behavior. Yeah, you show your students, your pupils, examples of positive behavior and collaborative behavior. But you also probably go into your classroom, you see a lot of pictures on the walls, sure. Pictures like this, yeah. You can see these are all pictures about working together, cooperating, helping one another, okay? All show people helping one another. And these are the types of things you might have up around your room in your class. I just like to take a look at those. Are there any of those pictures there? Can you see any pictures there? Of those pictures, is there a picture there that you recognize from Spain? A picture taken in Spain this year. Can you see one there? Put it in the chat box. If you see a picture that might have been taken in Spain, you said four. Yeah, I think the people, chain, yes, the people who have are in this line here, passing buckets of water. Where, yes, there's a fire. Where would that be? Could be in yeah. This was in Galicia. There were also some fires, of course, in Asturias, and then of course in our neighbor next door in Portugal, they had some horrendous fires this year as well. And you know, of course, we see pictures of suffering, of people suffering, but we also saw lots of pictures of people helping one another. And I think when you see those types of pictures, I mean, many times on the news there'll be these kind of human interest stories of people helping one another. I'm one of these sort of, I can be quite cynical and say, well, that's not the news. I just want the facts. But actually, it's quite nice to see examples of people actually being kind to one another and helping one another. Um, those things, I mean, I think we see way too much of people not helping one another, and that can be quite depressing sometimes. Um, I think if you one little experiment you can try many times is just try smiling at someone. Yeah, it's scientifically proven that if you smile at someone, they're sort of like 99% likely to smile back at you. We're programmed to sort of mimic the types of expressions we see in other people. If we see happiness in other people, it brings out happiness in us. If we see cooperation in other people, it brings it out in us. This is pretty much a fact. Yeah, well, it is a fact. And because I said it, I suppose it's a fact. No, but it is. It has been actually studied. And so what we're going to do, going on from these pictures a little bit, what can we do? What kind of questions? Now, if you had these pictures in class, what kind of questions might you bring up with your students here to engage with these pictures, to get them to engage with this idea, to elicit this idea, to get them into the idea of collaboration, of working together, of helping one another? What kind of questions would you ask your students? If you want to put them in the chat box, we can look at some of those. How do they feel? Sure. Yeah. I think this is one of these questions. How do they feel? One of the most important questions you can ask your students, even when they walk into class, is how they feel. And here you're getting them to think about how other people feel. Incredibly important. That empathy. What are they doing? Yeah. Would you like to be treated like this? Yes. Do unto others as they would do unto you. Sure. Would you do that? Do they feel happy about doing it? Why do you think they feel like that? Good. All good questions. Just maybe one more, real quick, one or two more. Some people are busily typing. I want to give everyone a chance. Okay. So we're going to kind of move on, and I'm going to, let's see, what do you think? Why do you think it's a win-win? Oh, a win-win situation. I like that one as well. Very nice. Yeah, because collaboration should be a win-win. Yeah. Would you like to be there? Okay. Here's some questions I had up here. You could ask them things like, who helps you? What do they do? They probably say that their parents help them, maybe their brother or sister, their friends. Um, who do you help? I'm sure that they help their parents, they help their friends and colleagues and their classmates at school. Okay? And how do they do that? Yeah. So they'll be able to put themselves into this situation. Do they know people like this? So maybe there's a picture of someone, for example, a fireman or something, or a person doing something, working some way, and you might ask them if they know someone like that, or if they would like to be that person. So if you have pictures of jobs, once again, I think is a very common thing to do with students. Who would you like to be? Yeah. Oh, I would like to be a doctor because, and I think primary students are likely to say because of the things that you do for other people. I think it's pretty natural, but you're bringing this out in them. Or have you ever done any of these things? Okay, that's another possibility. You can do this as well with things like stories. If you notice here, we have a story. This is a story that you might be using. You might be using a lot of common childhood stories. Uh, you know, um, that you've used many times in the past, or you might be, for example, looking at teaching materials, for example. This is from a course book, and there's a story. This is a story with a value. If you see at the bottom here, it says, be sensitive to friends' feelings. So, and Mike will be taking a look at ways of using stories later. Another type of story, yeah, sometimes we see stories in videos. And what I'm going to do is show you a very quick video, and I would like you to give me an idea of the types of values that you see in this video, and maybe you might think of how you might even use this in class with your students. Possibly, you might be using this in class with your students to, do very much what we did with the pictures before, asking them some questions about it. But here I'm going to show you the video and think about the types of values that it transmits. So, I'll paste the video in here and let's watch it. Okay, so once again, if you want to put in the chat box there what types of values you see expressed there in the video. Okay, some people maybe couldn't see it. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll paste in the chat box here, I'll paste the link in case you want to copy it and watch it later. Okay, so I'm going to paste that in now. There's a link in case you would like to watch that. Okay, kindness, empathy. Okay, anything else? Generosity, cooperation, which is, of course, a synonym for collaboration as well. Kindness, generosity. Okay, good. So all of these types of ideas are there: cooperation, collaboration, helping one another. They got the food. Together, people are stronger. Okay, so there we go. And I think that these are the types of things. I think these are kind of nice. It's a nice little story there in that video as well. But once again, showing them examples is extremely important. Now we're going to move on to a few things that maybe another idea here, which is a little bit more practical. This one comes from Cesar Bona, who many of you know, have heard about, award-winning teacher here in Spain. And he has an activity called Ask the Class, because we've talked about this idea that many times students need to see each other as a resource, and not just the teacher, not simply the teacher as a resource. So here, for example, we have a board. For example, in class, they would have this is a cork board that they could have up a bulletin board, and there are different columns here: questions, answers. Yeah, and what would happen is if a student has a question, instead of just simply asking the teacher, when a question comes up in class, the teacher could write that question down on a piece of paper and put it in that column on the question column. Or students could actually do this themselves. They could start writing down their own questions and putting them up, posting them under the question column. Other students, when they see those questions, may be interested in answering them or may be able to. If they're not able to answer them, they may want to go home. They want to look this up on the internet, look in a book, ask somebody they know, maybe their parents about it, learn from them, and then bring the answer back to class on a piece of paper and put it up next to the question with their name on that answer. Okay, one thing we might extrinsically try to motivate our students by talking about the wise man, or the wise woman of the month, the person who answered the most questions or gave the best answer or whatever. That's one way of doing it. But another way, without even having to do that, we use the board simply to have other people thank people for So you might have a column for them to thank each other. I congratulate Luisa, for example, because she helped me with this or that or the other. Yeah. Oh, she gave me the answer to this. Yeah. So you might put that in there. So it's a nice little activity, very simple, but obviously you see what's happening here. You're getting the students to see each other as a resource and to appreciate each other as a resource. Simple activity. Well, not an activity. It's actually just an activity. It's a process that you'd actually have in class. This is an ongoing activity, really, in class. And a good one to start maybe at the beginning of the year. Not too late though now. Still can start that activity and a good one for your students. Now we're going to talk a little bit about something that Michael will be speaking about later, which is project-based learning. And I think this is something which is out there all the time. We're seeing project-based learning. We're hearing about project-based learning. So what is project-based learning? Just to kind of quickly take a look at this before Michael takes a little bit more of an in-depth look. Project-based learning, I mean, we're really looking at key knowledge um, that we're working on. So we're talking about student learning goals. There's standards-based content that we might be looking at, but around skills such as these critical thinking, problem-solving, communication, these higher-order thinking skills, these 21st century skills, that and collaboration is one of those. Also, we talked about this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but relevant real world problem. When something is real, a project, the more real it is, yeah? If it's something that's actually necessary, that they're actually doing it for a real reason, it's going to make it far more meaningful for them. So we see projects becoming not just something you do in class with, on a piece of cardboard, yeah, for example. It's about actually trying to find some kind of solution for a real problem many times. Okay, inquiry. So what we're looking at here is the idea of a encouraging a rigorous, extended process of asking questions. A culture of inquiry. Really, questions are the basis for education, and they're also what makes people more interested in learning over time. The more inquisitive your students are, the more they want to learn. Choice, we're going to be talking about that today as well. Students making choices. The more choice they have in what they do, the more meaningful it's going to be for them as well, and for their colleagues and for their classmates. And we'll talk about choice as well in terms of how you assess things many times. Mike will be looking at that later. Critiquing something, so yeah, assessing, part of any kind of educational process, you want to assess something and why. Well, if you think about assessment for learning, it's so that they can improve not only the product of what they're working on, yeah, not only the final outcome, but they can improve the process of learning. They become better learners. That should be the real final thing that we're looking at. And finally, a public product as well. So this is not just for speaking skills or public speaking skills or whatever you're doing, however you publicly present this. This is because it makes it more real, more meaningful for students as well. So some considerations. We know that a lot of these things, making learning meaningful, critiquing and revision, making public product, these are all basic important things about project-based learning, but they're also things we would do all of the time. There are some aspects of project-based learning which could be difficult at times. There's a lot of research, looking for sources. There are maybe times when we may not be able to do all these projects. As English teachers, we may not be doing these projects all the time, but a lot of our colleagues may be doing them in other subjects. So, there's a bit of a balance there, whether you're doing them all the time. Sometimes you really just need to focus on a lot of teaching of language. So there are these times that maybe you might be doing a project like at the end of a unit or something like that. That's not necessarily project-based learning entirely, yeah? So we can't simply have a project at the end of a unit as the collaborative bit, but we many times will do this, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But what we want to do is remember that we want to establish a culture of collaboration. So what Michael's going to look at now are ways of actually different types of activities in which you can establish and build up these ideas of collaboration in your students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hand over to him now and get out of his way so he can continue on with the talk. Michael.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian. Good evening, everybody. So let's continue with the presentation. So what we're going to look at in the second half is building towards this project. Okay, so we can just have a look at it. It's a project where our students need to present a chart about the seasons to their classmates. They need to include details such as the weather, the temperature, what they need to wear, the activities they can do. Okay, so this is the project we're working towards. But as Brian said, the project at the end is not the only collaborative work. Okay, we want our students to be working collaboratively all of the time. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be looking at. I would say as well, it makes sense to show a project like this at the start of the unit, so students know what they're working towards. It gives them a goal to work towards, and it makes all of the practice activities relevant. Okay, even if your students have done a project like this in previous years, you might even have some photos or even a video that you can show to give them an even clearer idea of what it is they're going to be doing. Okay, so I've got some vocabulary to teach, some weather vocabulary. Some 10 items, I think. But before I teach my weather items, there's a step I've forgotten. Okay, so what would I do before teaching my 10 weather items? What would I see? Okay, or what would I be interested in finding out? Okay, any ideas there? Start of the lesson, do we just go in and we teach our vocabulary, or is there something we want to check before that? Okay, any ideas? If you've got the brainstorm. Okay, see how much they already know. Yeah, that's what I was getting at, Susanna, which involves brainstorming. So seeing what they already know, see what weather words they already know. This is good. It builds their confidence. Okay, they feel good that they see that they know something. It might predict some of the content. So some of the words that come up that are in the activity, that will make the activity more manageable. And also they'll start to see that they can learn. They can learn from one another. Okay, good. So this is our activity. We've got our weather items, and we can see what do you know. But the next question is, how do we find out what they already know? Okay, so what dynamic would we do to find that out? Okay, so if you think we want to know if these primary students know any weather items. So I'm going to say, do you know any weather words? And you give an example, perhaps cold. Okay, and then you say, right, anyone else? And the students put up their hand one at a time, and they tell you, and you write it on the board, and the rest of the class are writing down the words on the board in silence. Okay, so possibly not the most collaborative way of doing it, very teacher-centered, okay, and a little bit boring. Okay, so there are more collaborative ways of seeing what the students know and of brainstorming, of course. So let's just have a look at some of those. I've got a target on the screen. You can see 4 circles. You can also see a chart below. It's kind of 2 ways of setting up the same activity. So first of all, we ask students individually if they know any words, any weather words, and they would write what they know in the first column of the chart or in the middle of the target. Then after a minute or whatever time you deem appropriate, they look to their partner and tell the partner the words they know. The partner tells them. Anything that's new goes in the second column or in the second layer. Now that pair have the same words. They turn to another pair, give them what they know. The other pair, anything that is new goes in the third column, or if you're doing the target, the third layer. And finally, a member of that group of 4 tells the class their words, and the rest of the class write them down in the 4th column or in the 4th layer of the target. Okay, and in this step, the teacher would write the words on the board, because some of the students might have made spelling mistakes with some of their words because they're primary students. So that would be a much more collaborative way of seeing what the students know, rather than one at a time round the room. This way the students are talking, and it's very student-led rather than teacher-led. A couple of things. You might want to check that they know or understand the words they're writing down. So if a student says rain, the other one might write down rain, but not actually know what rain is. So you tell them at the start that if they don't know, they can ask, okay, and the other one gives a definition or a translation. And afterwards as well, you might get them to categorize the words to check that they've understood them. These types of activities as well, it's nice to give them a target. So you can say, well, I know 20 words. I know 20 weather words, the teacher. Do you think you can beat me as a class? And then the class work together. They work collaboratively to try to get more than the teacher. Don't set the bar too high, though. Okay, try and make it something manageable for them. You might also give your class a post-it note each, or a little piece of paper, and they can write any words they know, or just one if you like, with a picture. And then once they've done that, they stand up, they go and find another pupil, they read the word they have. So this is snowman, give it to their partner, and the partner says this is rain. And they have with little drops, and then they go up to somebody else and they say this is rain, and then they get a new one, and they keep swapping their little cards. So this is another collaborative way of seeing what they know. Okay, so much better than one at a time. Okay, good. So we've seen that they know a few words. I've taught them some vocabulary. We might do a song in class. The songs are very effective with primary students, I think. They're good for contextualizing vocabulary or grammar, and they make it memorable. So the students, if it's a good rhythm, they'll remember that song and more likely to remember the words. Okay, and they tend to like singing in my experience. Okay, so a song like this, it might include some kind of gap fill or choose the right word between two. Then they listen, and then they sing it themselves. Okay, but is there anything else we can do to make this a collaborative task? Well, the activity I propose is that the students, once they've sung it as a song, we all close our books, okay? And the aim is to try to remember this song as a class, okay? So you get a student up to the front, and they sing as much of the song as they can remember, okay? And when they get stuck, one of their classmates can help them. So either come up and take over the singing to continue, or give them the next word or the next line. Okay, if the pupil gets stuck and no other students can remember, the students can play a joker. So they have 3 jokers to play in this game. And when the students play a joker, the teacher reads out the next word or the next line to help them along. Okay. Now these jokers, you might just say, well, this is 3 in this game. Or if you play a lot of games like this with your students, then your class can be awarded jokers to use in games for various different behaviors. So we're talking about collaboration and pro-social pupils. So if a student one day shows an act of kindness or helps another student, then you might award the whole class a joker for that behavior. So you're giving a prize for their individual behavior, but it's to the whole class. Remember, we're looking at establishing a culture of collaboration, okay? And then they can use these jokers in their games. And of course, we might also have a bit of extrinsic motivation, maybe a sticker for every student in the class if they all get to the end of the song. Because these are stickers that go with this particular course book. You can see there's one that says super singer, stunning speaker. Okay, so these are you would award one to all the students at the end of the song. Okay, good. So we've got a bit more vocabulary to teach. We're going to look at some activities to do in different seasons. So the basic task is a listening task. They hear 3 people say what they do in different seasons, and then one person doesn't say, and if one of the activities and seasons isn't said, they need to spot that. Okay. Anyway, they've done the listening exercise. We've worked with the vocabulary a little, and we want our students to test each other on this vocabulary, to practice it a little bit more in groups. So how do we do this? Well, we've got a table of students, perhaps 4 of them, and they need to come up with 3 words to define each of these items. Okay. Now, again, you might add a dynamic here. You might not just say, as a group, think of 3 words to define each, because then one student will perhaps dominate and do it for the group. So you might include some kind of think, pair, share activity where they all do it individually and then as a pair and then together and then decide. Anyway, so they think of their 3 words for each. So I've done a few examples down the bottom. So I've done snow, mountain and cold for snowboarding. Flower, rain and cool. Well, actually, I'll put that one to you. What card do you think I was describing with flower, rain and cool? Any ideas? You could tell me in the chat box. Which one was I describing? Very good, Alexandra. Fastest. I'm describing the spring. So the group have prepared 8 groups of 3 words to describe these cards, but they've not written what words are being described. So they've not written their cards in here. So what they would do next is they would either pass their papers round, or you could move the whole group to the next table, and they would try to work out which of these words are being described. So match them up with the 3 words describing them. Okay, so it's a good activity because it's very student-centered. The students are kind of setting each other riddles, setting each other little tests, and they're often more motivated to answer these and to work these out than if it's always just the teacher setting them questions. Okay, so it's a way of having the students set each other questions in groups. Okay, good. So let's move on to cards. Now, many of us primary teachers, we use flashcards, of course, to present vocabulary. Then we might have the cards moving around the room, and there's all sorts of things you can do with flashcards. But the only thing with flashcards is that you have one set. Okay. Now, many course books will have word or picture cards, word and picture cards, I should say. So you would have these picture cards here of spring, summer, autumn, winter, and activities, and then corresponding word cards. Now, these are good because all students can have a copy. So that opens up a lot of possibilities for collaborative learning. Okay, so just a few examples. Imagine you're in, you put your students into groups of 6. 5 of them have their picture cards in front of them. 1 of them has the word cards, and that one is the teacher, and just reads out, "Show me spring, show me snowboarding." And all of the other students in the group have to show the card that's being said. You can also have them in pairs playing memory game. So you've got the picture cards on one side, the word cards on the other, they're face down. Students take it in turns to pick up a picture card, pick up a word card. If they correspond, you keep them. If not, you put them back, and the other student's turn. You need to remember where they are. The student with the most pairs wins. Bingo, of course, again, a group of 6. A teacher, one of the students with the word cards. Each student picks 4 of their picture cards, and the teacher reads them out, the word cards out in the order that they want. When one of those pictures is said, that is put to one side, and once they've all been said, you say bingo or house. What's missing, of course, so again, the teacher shows the picture cards, has them all out on the desk. They tell their group to close their eyes, remove one, and the rest of them have to remember which one's been removed and say that item. And if they do, then they're the teacher. So there's lots of little things you can do that are collaborative and don't involve the teacher with these picture cards. Of course, the teacher would model the game once first. So we play it as a class first, but once we've played it as a class once, then the students will get the hang of it very quickly. Mime and guess. Yeah, I can see there's some lots of nice ideas coming in the chat box as well. Good. Let's move on to reading. Okay, so reading is not, of course, something that we always need to do individually, and it's not an activity that always needs to be silent, although it can be. And I'm going to propose a few activities around reading that build collaboration, involve collaboration. Okay, so this is our exercise. We've got 4 pictures and 4 texts, and you need to match up the pictures to the texts. I've hidden the text for now, so I would do this in this case with an interactive whiteboard software. You could do it just hiding them in the book. So hiding them, the first thing we might get students to do is to brainstorm the vocabulary that's in the pictures. This would perhaps predict some of the content of the reading activities, okay, or the reading text. Then what our activity is that each student reads one text. Okay, each student is responsible, so they're in groups of 4 to read for reading one text, and then they need to read to their group what was contained within their text. So the group builds up an understanding of all of the texts if each member of the group does their job. Okay, so there's this kind of interdependence. Okay, the dynamic you could use for this, so you could have the 4 texts around the classroom, and the students go up to the area of the classroom where their text is and go back to their group and tell them. You might have the book projected onto the board. Okay, and you show the text one at a time, and the students close their eyes when it's not their text, or you just tell them to read their text in the book. Okay, so this is called jigsaw reading. Okay, so they're trying to put together a jigsaw. Okay, to get complete the jigsaw, to complete the understanding. And we're actually going to have a quick go at this activity in a slightly different format. So I'll explain how it's going to work. I'm going, now you're in groups from the start. You remember the season you're in because that's when you were born. So I'm going to show each of you your text, and I only want you to look at your text. So when the other seasons are on, I want you to look away or close your eyes, okay? No peeking. Now I'm just going to flash up your text for 5 seconds. See how much of it you can remember. Okay, so the aim is to remember as much as you can for 5 seconds. Now in class, I wouldn't necessarily set them a short time limit. I want them to read it carefully. But here we're doing it because we have a high level of English and because we don't have unlimited time. Okay, so those of you who are in spring, are you ready? I'm going to flash up your text in a second. I want you to read it and I want the other ones to look away. Okay, nothing in the chat box for now. So spring, here we go. Okay, that was spring. Now summer, those of you who are in the summer group, you can open your eyes or look at the screen. I want you to have a read. Go. Okay. Now autumn, those of you who are in autumn, I want you to have a read of your text now. And finally, those of you who are in winter, I want you to have a read of your text now. Okay, good. So let's stop there. So those of you who are in the spring, in fact, what we're going to do is I might get you to share this one group at a time, but because we're pushed for time and everyone can share at the same time. Okay, so feel free to put in the chat box what it is you remembered from your text, and the rest of us, we're going to be looking at the chat box and see if we can build up a picture of the whole text based on what other people have provided us with. Okay, something about skiing, birds not liking the cold. Okay, so somebody liked the flowers in the spring, something to do with high temperatures and eating strawberries, running a kite, it's autumn, it's snowy and windy. Okay, so again, we've remembered something from our text. Again, as I say, in class, we would give our students more time to read them, and in groups, one at a time, they would tell the rest of their group what they had. Okay, so I'm going to show you the text now, so feel free to have a look at the complete texts. Okay, this is what we were looking at. Now we've done a reading activity here, and there's a good chance that some of our students won't have understood all of the words in the texts. Okay, now how do we deal with unknown vocabulary? Well, we can pre-teach it, but then of course if we pre-teach all of those words, then our students won't be able to work out any of those words from context and won't be able to guess at them, so we don't want to pre-teach too much. You might get students putting their hand up at the end saying, I don't understand this word, or you might ask them what they don't understand. And again, how do we approach this? So do we say, put your hand up if you don't understand a word, and they put their hand up one at a time, and we tell them, they tell us the word, and we tell them what it means, okay? I don't think it's ideal. Some students won't put their hand up if they don't understand because they'll feel embarrassed. Perhaps they don't understand lots of words and they can't keep putting their hand up, so they just keep their mouth shut. Okay, one good way of solving this is in groups, of course. So remember they're in groups of 4, and you say at the end, right, are there any words here you didn't understand? I'd like you to tell the other people in your group, okay? And I would like you, if you know any of the words, to explain them to your classmates. Okay, so this is they can deal with some of the some of the words they don't know in groups. Okay, there may still be some words they don't understand at the end. What do? Well, they write them on a piece of paper. So the words the group doesn't understand go down on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper gets passed around. So the group swap their paper, and we see if they can help each other. So there might be somebody in another group who understands this group's unknown words. Okay, so, and again, then they get passed back, and we see if we've learned anything from our peers. And then finally, of course, if they still don't know the words, well, there's always the dictionary or research, or we can just tell them. But we don't have to tell them immediately. We want to see if they can help one another, because we're trying to build a culture of collaboration. Okay, good. So this is we're still on our text, okay? Remember that to learn a word, to sort of really learn a word, we need to see it a few times. They say between 7 and 15, depending on who you listen to. Okay, so we've got another reading text, a reading activity here. This one is called Spot the Difference. So you might know spot the difference from pictures, okay, finding as many differences as you can between two pictures. This one is on a text. So each student gets their individual text back, okay, and they make some changes to it. So some vocabulary changes, perhaps nouns or verbs. Then they read out their text to the rest of the group, and the rest of the group try and notice what's been changed and say what the original word is. So again, they're really thinking hard, trying to recall those words. It's more practice with the vocabulary. And we're actually going to have a little go at this ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to read you out one of the texts, but I've sneakily made a few changes to it, and I'm going to see if you can spot them. All right, so put them in the chat box if you can. Here we go. It's windy and I can fly my car. It's autumn. The weather is hot. There are lots of fish on the tree in my bedroom. Yum. Right. Not my car, my kite. Fish. So do you not have fish on trees, Marga? So I wonder if anyone can remember what was on. There we go, Anna. It was an apple on the tree. It wasn't fish. Exactly. So remembering the original word. Yeah, apple. So we've got car and kite. Any? Good. Pond, not bedroom. It's not bedroom, but it wasn't quite pond either. Yeah, it's not hot. It was cool. So the only thing we're missing is what the original word for bedroom was. So I'm going to share with you. I see many of you have been paying attention. This is what I read out, and then I've got it next to the original text. Okay, so this was again a fun little way of pupils challenging each other rather than the teacher just challenging them. I mean, this does work as well. A teacher can change words, but students can do this in groups as well. Okay, another collaborative activity. Good. Let's have a look at another activity, which is to do with stories. Brian was mentioned these earlier in his part. Okay, so stories like this, students tend to find them quite engaging. These kind of comic book stories, and they're good for contextualizing grammar and vocabulary. Again, like songs, and they also may have a value. Okay, because we're talking about teaching values today as well. So typically, students would read the story, perhaps do a comprehension question, and maybe act it out, which is very collaborative. But we're looking here at collaborating at the start. So what I would do here is I would hide the text boxes and provide the students with the text boxes. So if they're in groups of 4, we've got 12 boxes in the story. That's 3 boxes for each student. Now the student needs to put them individually. The students need to put them where they think they go on the story. Okay, and then as a group, they can talk and see if they disagree and start to move them around. So again, it's a bit like a puzzle. Alternatively, you can have a much bigger group. So you can give these to 12 students and you can tell them to get in a line. So get into a line according to the order of the story. This is also a very communicative task. They're going to need to be able to say, no, this is before this because there's snow on this picture, or this he's happy. So they need to justify where they go in the line and sort of communicate with one another to try and get in the right order. Okay, so these are the collaborative ways of using this story. I've also hidden the value. I wonder if anyone can find the value. So the value of this story is one of the word cards, and I've hidden it to draw your attention to it, which I would do with my students. And what's the value? Can anyone find it? It's one of the word cards. Yeah, anyone find the value? Be a very good, Alexandra. Be a good friend. Yeah, that was the value. Well done. Good. So some of you got that. Okay. Right, so we're moving on to our project now. Okay, now again, how would we approach this project? We wouldn't say, right, get yourselves in groups or put them in groups and do this project in a group. Okay, I think we would need to assign more specific roles to our students here. So, for example, there's 4 seasons here. You could assign a season to each student. Okay, so if you're spring, you need to come up with the months, the weather, the temperature, the activities, and the clothes for your season. Okay, and spring and autumn, winter, autumn, summer, summer, autumn. I need some work on or remembering the order of my seasons. Summer, autumn, and winter would do the same. They prepare the months, weather, temperature, activities, and clothes for their particular season. Then, of course, we might swap or move around and read each other's and decide if we need to make any changes or we need to add to them. Okay, so we've assigned roles. We could assign roles in other ways. Maybe there's a student who's very artistic, who's very good at drawing, but struggles a little bit with English. We could give them more of a role, make them the leader of the poster. Perhaps there's a student who's really good at writing and comes into their own, really coherent. We might give that student the task of coming up with the script of what is going to be said in the presentation to the class. Okay, so I'm talking about assigning different roles to the students. Okay, now we're working collaboratively, so let's see if we can assess collaboratively as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about peer evaluation. Okay, so peer evaluation is something our students need practice on to do it well. Okay, so if we just said, for example, right, I would like you to give a comment on each other's work with no further instruction, we might get something like, I liked it because it was good, or me ha gustado porque está bien. Okay, which is not very helpful, it's not very specific. Okay, so we need to teach them. Now, how might we assess this project? Well, let's think first of all about rubrics. So a rubric, of course, has different criteria for success, okay, and then it has different grades which show the extent to which the students met that criteria. Okay, now rubrics are useful. It's good to provide them to students before they do the task because they know what they need to do to succeed. Okay, but also afterwards to give them feedback so that they know where it is they need to improve. Okay, but it's not only teachers who can use rubrics, students can use them as well, and that's what we want to look at here. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas about how I would use a rubric for this task. So one of the things I would want to look at is whether they used the new vocabulary. Okay, so that's part of my criteria. The first one you'll see says the group uses vocabulary for the clothes you wear in that season. Now, can improve is having only used one, good is using two, and great is using three or more. Okay, just a very simple way for students to assess how much of the new vocabulary they've used. Okay, and in these clear terms, it's something they can do. What about assessing participation? So in a group project like this, we wouldn't just want one student to be doing all the reading, all the speaking, and the other three hiding behind the poster. We want them all to be collaborating. Okay, so again, participation, I think students, they would be able to judge how much their peers have collaborated. So can improve would be if it's only one person doing all the work. Great is if all four of them are speaking. Okay, so these are just some simple rubrics that students can use to assess one another. Okay, any other ideas? What else for this project that we've looked at? Any other ideas that you might include in assessment, or you think students would be able to assess one another on? Feel free, if you've got any ideas, to share them in the chat box. Okay, how creative they were, portfolio, pictures. Yeah, creativity is a tough one sometimes. I've sometimes struggled with creativity rubrics because I think it's quite it's quite subjective. So I'd be interested to hear more about that one. Good. Yeah, we've had vocabulary for a few. Yeah, perhaps the presentation, Marga, as you say, the quality of the artistic work as well. How neat it is exactly. Yeah, true. Beatriz, that's really nice. I think looking at the process as well. If they spoke English while they were making it, or if that was just left to the end. And I think that's a really important part of project-based learning. It's so much is about the process, not only the final product. Good, so nice ideas there. But we'd also want our students to make comments on each other's work, as well as ticking rubrics. Okay. So, but I think for them to be able to give good comments and not just say me gusta porque está bien, we need to teach them Okay, so we might give them some guidelines, such as these ones. Okay, so we tell them they need to be kind, they need to focus on the work and not the people. They can give challenges about the content. They should give things to improve, but be soft on the. They need to be specific. Now, this is really important for teachers and students alike. So, can we give each other a way to improve our project? So, just as an example, if you've got your students writing what their daily routine is, and they say, and you've told them that they have to use linkers. So for homework, they write. First, I get up. After that, I get dressed, and then I have my breakfast. Next, I go to school. So this person would have used linkers, and if you got some feedback like the linkers were good or good linkers, that's the sort of specific feedback we're looking for. And if a student gave me that feedback, then I would say, that's fantastic feedback, that's brilliant, that's specific. So I'd be giving the student feedback on their feedback. Okay, so they'd start to learn the type of feedback they need to give. Okay, and the feedback needs to be helpful. Okay, so if it doesn't benefit the work or the learner or the learning, don't share it. And once they've had a bit of practice in this, they'll get better at it, and they'll reject this unhelpful feedback. So you get me gustado porque está bien, and I've seen them say, no vale, eso no vale, you can't say that, you can't say that. Okay, so they know what feedback is. Okay, what good feedback is. Now, our project was to do with building a chart with the 4 seasons, having done a unit on the weather and weather vocabulary. Any other ideas of projects you would do having learned this sort of semantic group, this area of vocabulary? Any other ideas for projects or presentations you might do or you have done with your classes? Weather forecast video, Laura, lovely. Okay, any other ideas? Making a board game, yeah, really nice. Weather in other countries, yeah, a bit of research. Yeah, they've looked at their own context, they've looked at other countries too. Maps as well. There's some nice ideas coming through the chat box. I'm just going to share a couple of mine. So Laura, we great minds think alike, Laura. Okay, so this was something that I've done in my teaching as well, a weather forecast. So you would perhaps get them into groups of 4, somebody in the studio, 3 people in different parts of Spain. And the one in the studio is asking the people in different parts of Spain what the weather is like in their area. They'll say the temperature, what it's like, what you can do. They can bring a lot of fun in here, so we can add in props. So the student in the sunny areas wearing sunglasses, the one in the cold areas got a coat on, there's an umbrella there. We can film this, so it can be a really kind of motivational activity too. 4 Seasons Fashion Show is another activity I've seen, which is you've got students, you assign them a different season, okay, and they need to prepare. They need to come up with clothes they wear in that season, and actually bring them in and come up with scripts for activities they do. And they get up on the catwalk modeling their clothes while their classmate with a microphone is saying what they are wearing and what they are doing, so their activity, and they're miming that activity on the stage. Okay, so again, this is recorded, and this is something that students find really, really good fun, and they're using all the vocabulary they've learned and they're practicing it. Importantly here, you would say to them, this is what we're going to do, this is what we've learned, or they know what they've learned. Do we need any other words, any other vocabulary? And they would have to think if perhaps there were some words they need to do this task that they don't know. And then of course we can help them, we can teach that, we can learn it. But the students will be really motivated to learn that vocabulary because they can see a real goal or reason for learning it, which is this motivational project. Okay, good. Finally, we're talking about rubrics and success criteria. With these new projects, okay, we can of course give them the success criteria ourselves, but once they've done a few, why don't we ask our students what the success criteria is? So what makes a good weather forecast? What will you need to say? I mean, they've seen a weather forecast on television, or you could tell them to go home and watch it the night before. So they would know the sort of things that are said and the sort of language that needs to be used. And then that can form the basis of the rubric, so that they've decided, if you like, how they're going to be graded. And this will make them more motivated to do the task, okay, and get them to think more deeply about evaluation as well, okay. Good, and of course, as we said, it provides them choice, which is something that Brian was talking about earlier on. Okay, good. I think we're coming to the end of the webinar now. Then, so I hope you've been able to take a few practical activities away to use with your classes, and we've been able to convince you of the benefits of collaboration. You'll notice some of the activities today came from a course book, and the book that we used was a book called Pop Tropica English, which is a primary course book. So that's where the activities and the sources are from. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks very much for giving us some of your time at this late hour. Okay. It's been a pleasure, and I'll just hand you back over to Brian for some closing words.
Okay, thank you, Michael. It has indeed been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to share that with you. It's also been a pleasure to listen to a lot of your comments, or to read a lot of your comments, better said. It's always nice to come together, whether it's face to face or online. Yeah. And we hope to see many of you in the future as well, online again or face to face. Having said that, there's a few other things I'd like to mention. We also want to be thinking a little bit about what's coming up after this. So we will be sending you an email, as I said before. Remember what is in that email. This will be next week sometime. You'll be receiving this. You will have a link to the recording of this webinar, to the PowerPoint as well, to the presentation itself. You will have a diploma, and as well, we will be sending you a link to a survey. That survey is very important for us because it gives us a chance to find out what you thought about it, all the different aspects of the webinar, and also maybe some things that you'd like to see in the future, because we would very much like to continue with these types of trainings, online trainings, these webinars in the future. We will hope to get some of that information from you and see you then at a later date, either in a webinar or somewhere around Spain. So thank you very much again for coming. We thank Michael. I'd like to thank Michael for all the work he's done. And thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye, guys.